Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, and this is the Eve Universe Show. This time we are coming at you with the CSM 16 interviews, keeping them coming along, and we have Dr. Spod this time. How you doing, Dr. Spod?
Alive and well, but maybe I shouldn't have chosen the date for the interview, the one day that I haven't slept very well.
Oh. Man, trying to make days that work for this for these CSM interviews have been a bigger challenge for me than I expected. But I appreciate you managing to be able to slip into various different time schedules so that way we can get this done. But before we get into this, I want to make sure to lay out the rules and we can jump into it so that way to give you your fair opportunity. But this is a CSM 16 interview, the same as all the others. I have their candidacy post up in front of me, and if I know them ahead of time, I will make sure to disclose that, which in this case, Dr. Spod, you and I have talked many times before and have worked together in Talking Stations. We're pretty friendly with each other, so that's and I do know quite a bit about you outside of your campaign post, but I think your campaign post also has a lot of really good information, so we'll get into all that when we get there. But I have 50 minutes to kind of talk to you about whatever I want to talk to you, to try to drill in to find out who you are as a CSM candidate. And then I give you 10 final minutes to have control over the platform, say whatever you need to, and then we'll wrap it up. This will go on YouTube with all of the others. There is a playlist now for the CSM 16 candidates. Make sure you check them all out so that way you can vote. It is incredibly important that we have as many people as possible engaged in the CSM voting process in order for this to be successful. All that being said, let's open it up to you, Dr. Spod. How you doing? What are you up to? And how do you want to begin?
How do we want to begin? I don't know. Do we go straight to the beginning of time in terms of my space career, or do we go for something else? Like, what am I doing right now?
Normally, I ask the question like, tell me your Eve story, and you do actually tell your Eve story. Although you have, it's a very wall of texty kind of thing, so maybe some of the highlights. When did you
provide the too long didn't read version?
when did you join Eve? Let's go with highlights. When did you join Eve?
The exact date's not clear because I don't have my original characters. Because one of the things I mentioned in my post is I started by watching my brother play, and I was a kid at that time because this is like 2005, 6. So I was just using emails to get free trials, try it out, play it for 30 days, and then mommy and daddy won't give me their credit card, so I can't play it anymore. So like I'd been cognizant of the game and trying it from like 2004 probably at the earliest, but in terms of actually being a player, the first stint was 2009, where I played for about 2 months, and then I began really playing the game probably late 2013.
Okay, so you were exposed to it when you were a kid, and then in 2009 you dabbled with it but didn't really stick, and then in 2000, what was the last one? 13?
Late 2013.
That's when it stuck.
When I really like. That's when I. It wasn't necessarily that the game didn't stick before. It was the lack of a credit card was the real issue.
You had enough financial independence and control over your own life.
I was an adult.
that you could actually finally start to play. That makes sense. Got it. Okay, so and then of course not too long after they made it so that wouldn't have been a barrier anymore. But okay, so that being said, normally I try to dig into like the area of space or the area of the game that the CSM person is interested in, because that is, probably where their platform lies, right? But you stand out to me as somebody that is very important, and so I want to drill into something very specific, which is your first bullet point, third-party development. Now, Steve Ronikin, for anybody who's followed me for my career, since Steve Ronikin first started running, I have put him as the number one of my ticket every single year he ran. And I said it openly and publicly every single year that he ran the entire time. It doesn't matter how good everybody else was, Steve was on the top of my ticket. And the reason why was because I got into this game early on, and the reason why I'm in Aderon Robotics is because of Marcel Devereaux, who is a developer at Google, who created an older app named Aura for Android. And so third-party development is why I got into Aderon. It's what I believe in, and it's an incredibly strong tool, but also doesn't get the respect it deserves from either side, and really, really more than anything else is a big value to the CSM. It's the exact kind of thing that we need a CSM person for, that can continue to push for that sort of stuff. And the difference between having Steve Ronikin on the CSM and not having him on the CSM was so starkly different that it was nothing else mattered comparatively. Likewise, now we once again do not have a representative on the CSM for third-party development. Invasions did not get an endpoint for the actual status of invasions on the CSM endpoint, not because they didn't know to do it, but because the entire infrastructure of CCP isn't currently engaged with that with the API, partially because there's no one there to do it. So all that said, you have put my number one thing at the top of your list. So now I'm going to challenge you on that. Why do you want to be the third-party developer CSM representative?
Well, ultimately, I didn't necessarily want to run for CSM. I had the same problem with you. I always put Steve number one, and I'll put it out now that I don't think I can kind of get anywhere close to that guy. He's a legend in terms of the work he did on the CSM. So nobody can challenge the mighty Steve. But yeah, for the last couple of years, and again this year, every time I'd watch the candidates come in, and I'd be waiting and waiting and waiting for somebody to bring up third-party development. And I think maybe two even mention it as a side, as a not even a side topic, just in passing. And it was driving me nuts. So the reason I care about it is because it's actually, for the most part, why I play the game in terms of what I actually like to do. A significant chunk of my gameplay is, yes, I run an alliance of some sort, and that takes a lot of my time. But when I'm not doing that, when I'm out walking the dog, I'm sitting there planning really potentially dubious things to do with the API, but things to do with the API that I really want to play around with. And that's become a little bit fallow in the last couple of years, like you say, with the loss of Steve as a CSM candidate. But it's a multifaceted problem, because it's not necessarily just down to Steve's representation being missing. There's been a lot of internal work in CCP, especially if you're familiar with the whole migration to protobuf is something that they're working on, which is sort of, in layman's terms, it's changing some of the core language of how data in the game moves around, and creating and changing how the API works, while also changing that. It's just kind of juggling two different dangerous plates that interact with each other in ways that you don't really want one to fall over and break the other, kind of thing.
Right. Well, the other issue is that, like, I mean, let's be honest. In CCP, there's one of the issues, one of the quirks of the nature of CCP as an organization, is that a lot of things happen or don't happen on the will or the backs of key developers or people who are willing to exert the will to make it happen. In other words, the API was supported not just because of Steve, but because of CCP Fox 4, right? And then CCP, there was a few other CCPers after that. But I believe now the major guy who is also helping out with the API is also not there anymore. So what that means is that we need, let's be clear, the third-party development community needs to court CCP developers to help convince them that it is worth their 20% time or whatever it takes to take up the tickets, because the work tickets are there to do to update the API. So that's why I'm saying that it's important for us to have a CSM member who is focused on this, because that kind of schmoozing, that kind of developer relationship, in order to find the correct developer and encourage them in the correct way to make this happen, is the thing that, like, really is needed to make this API work out. Otherwise, it's going to continue to be a thing that's incredibly powerful, mostly in the hands of the people who are already powerful and therefore can access it, and therefore function as somewhat of a unfair advantage against those who only use information in the client, and therefore continue to be kind of this almost pain point within the community when it really could be much, much more.
Absolutely. I lost my point there, I'm afraid.
No, it's fine. I was actually just kind of riffing off of your point, but the one other piece to that I want to bounce off of, because you mentioned nefarious things with the API. I do want to stress that, especially once they transitioned over to the Swagger API, the ESI, anytime that you've used the API by logging into Eve to give your key instead of getting the key the old way, that developer has signed an agreement that says that they're not allowed to do bad things in game with the stuff. The idea of like using an API to spy, convincing you to like if it came out that Jave Assets was secretly spying on everybody's stuff, that would actually be a complete violation of the agreement, and that would be a big deal for the developer. Like he wouldn't be able to develop third-party apps anymore. For
it should. I believe the dev agreement also specifies that pretty much you're guaranteed your account's getting banned for doing that as well. It's like it's a sacred line you do not cross.
Yeah, this was something that they danced around for a while. I remember like back in like 2012, originally they tried to create a dev agreement that involved like a $50 transaction, and the third-party developers lost their goddamn minds, and so that never went through. And so they sat around this and danced around it for a while. But when they switched over to the ESI, they made sure to bake into the API rules that you actually aren't allowed to do that. Who's monitoring it? Well, every single API transaction via every single API, like app, authorized app, uses that app's signature with it. If you remember a few months back, this is not the CSM interview. So we're going to get back to the CSM interview. We'll probably talk more about APIs another time. But the point of the matter is that we do need somebody who on the CSM that knows how important this is, because if we don't have that, then there's nobody advocating for that, and that has demonstrable problems. So I appreciate you digging into that, but I guess we can move on to the more traditional stuff and say you mostly present yourself as a tradesman and an industrialist. First of all, I put the alliance logo of each person's organization in the middle, and I didn't actually know, even though we've known each other for a while, I didn't know your organization. And when I pulled it up, I'll be honest with you, I didn't know your logo, even though it looked pretty cool. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your organization and your logo?
Well, that logo, that was made by good Sir Rick Javix, who you had on the other day, I think.
There you go. Yep.
Although there's, as much as I love it, like genuinely he did an amazing job. Because it's basically, it started off as a top-down view of an Athanor, and that's where the kind of little jagged edges come from, and the ring around the sides. And then the folded hands is supposed to be a keep star and people coming together kind of thing. Unfortunately, no, we don't have a keep star, but the symbology still counts. Right.
Well, I mean, I think the keep star image really, really works because it's such an iconic profile. CCP clearly put a lot of design into making sure that was, a clear silhouette. So it makes sense to use for a logo, especially for somebody who does trade and whatnot. So, okay, so you got back into the game in 2013. You like doing trade and industry. First of all, I guess we'll ask the question that I like to ask. What do you believe is the purpose and value of industry in EVE Online? Like as a game mechanic, not just like.
That's not an easy question, damn. I didn't expect that one. The purpose and value of industry in the game.
Yeah. Like why do we have industry in EVE Online? What value? Because as a CSM member, if you're going to be representing it, you have to understand where it fits into the wider whole. Why even have an industry program in the first place, or an industry system in the first place?
You can't really have a sandbox without it. You know, if the sandbox just magically refills from nowhere, it's not a sandbox. It's That's a really damn hard question. I should have prepared more. The
So
value. It's a difficult question because it's kind of like asking what is the value of any given like core feature of a game. It's game defining. You know, it's without industry, Eve is not Eve. Eve is basically Elite Dangerous. You know, it takes Eve and turns it from a generic shooter, because really when you actually boil it down, and I'm sure people will get upset at this, but when you boil down the PvP, it's kind of like a bit of a, it's like World of Warcraft with extra maths. So the actual like PvP combat side of the game, in some ways, of course, yes, it is deeper and there's blah blah blah, but in some ways, mechanically, it's actually not that crazy deep. So adding industry creates like basically triples the amount of content available in the game by a long way. It not only like gives certain people things to do, because some people just don't like fighting. It also gives those people that do like fighting an entire reason to exist. You know, that's why we have infrastructure. That's why we have resources. All of that stuff is, for the most part, one of the huge reasons why people fight in the first place, beyond the occasional like, oh, I don't like you, you don't like me, let's have a punch up. It's usually you've got something shiny that makes other shiny things that I need to make loads of money or punch other people. I want it, I'm going to punch you.
right. So would you say, and this wasn't a trick question, your answer actually helped me think about it myself. Would you say then that the primary value of industry is to give everything else in Eve purpose? Like otherwise, if otherwise a fight's just like a skirmish or brawl. Otherwise, like what? Why mine? Why have an empire? Why fight at all? The industry and the building and that stuff is what gives everything else its purpose.
Yeah, and it's an extension of the other existing mechanics, like, you know, ratting and things like that, because that, of course, is also another valid reason. You know, you might fight over because Area X is a great ground to make loads of money out ratting.
Right.
And
But ultimately, you're making money,
family.
but you're making money in order to foster the work of another industrialist. Like that ratting wouldn't have been useful if there wasn't. I guess you could say that without the industrialist, you just buy it from a store, like an NPC store.
Yeah, that's what I was imagining. I'm just trying to imagine an alternative universe Eve where there's just a magic NPC store. Insert money, get thing.
That's fair.
And everything's just based on money.
True. Yeah. So I would say that without the industry, then the money almost becomes like it's a totally different system, right? Because in Eve, the money is about scarcity. The money is about the relative value of things, right? Because nothing has a set value. The production, the resources that you're acquiring, the things that you do, the value of your labor, all of things are related to the supply and demand, and therefore the process of being an industry is not about having the correct skills or clicking the button or even being at your computer often enough. It's about knowing the system, getting a deeper and deeper understanding of the system, so that way you can have the correct positions, have the correct, fill the correct needs, and get the most profit.
Yeah, because without all of those layers, the game and sort of the inspiration behind doing anything in the game becomes massively one-dimensional.
Right.
So get money to get things, that then the end, which is actually still ultimately the goal, but like I said before, it opens the game up to so many more people and so much more interaction. Right. Like, especially with the latest industry changes, where they've essentially made it kind of harder to go it alone purely in industry. You're now forced to interact with people that you wouldn't. You got all the elite FCs with all their elite fighters. Previously, they wouldn't have any reason to talk to us turbo nerds sitting there with a bunch of spreadsheets. They've got no reason to talk to us, got no reason to interact. But now you're kind of forcing, but that's not a bad thing, interactions.
requiring, right? Like, I mean,
That's the
like
nicer word, yeah.
it's an essential piece of the puzzle, right? Like the fact that it wasn't essential was kind of a problem, as we just were saying. If we agree that the point of industry is to instill the purpose of things, right? If you go back to the beginning of Eve's design document, it says that death is a serious business. The industry side of things, the fact that it had to be built, the fact that it required the players to do these things is the thing that gives these things inherent value, which gives the death of them some sort of meaning, and it makes it a serious business. So, so yeah,
Right? Because
requiring an industrialist is it may feel bad, but it's only because it's like it's supposed to be a cost to have for you to have that thing. That way, you care about it when you're flying it. You want people to care about things when they're flying it, so that way, when you destroy them, they care about you destroying them.
it's even like it's a bit of a psychological trick in some ways, because how much do you care about the? I'm trying to think of an example. Just the thing that you bought from the store versus the thing that your cousin cut down in the woods, the tree, and then he gave it to your uncle, who crafted cut the wood into planks, and he gave it to someone else, who then carved it, and then another person then polished it and waxed it and designed it into this thing. While sure the ultimate cash value of the thing might be the same, it now gives that thing provenance. It's now got story.
Right. But let's take a step back though. So you mentioned the industry changes. I'm going to ask a question, but then I'm going to give it some more framing. These industry changes, do you believe that they are good or bad? And the reason why I say that is because a lot of people who would purport to like represent industrialists, like the industrialist experience, like your desire is to make things easier for you. And so often from like industrialists and resource harvesters and all that sort of stuff, we see things like, ganking should be harder in high sec or not possible, or, these changes are bullshit because it takes extra work now. Which it's important for, CSM representatives to bring those pain points to CCP, but I also believe that it's important for a representative to hopefully understand how all of this plays in together and the actual reason why these things are the way they are. So let me bring it back to you. As a representative of industrialists, do you believe that these changes that CCP have been doing are good or bad? And what is your philosophy on how where they're going with these recent years or months or years?
And this is going to be controversial, but I think they're overwhelmingly good. I think it was a major positive change in terms of just bringing health to the industry. Because one way I kind of visualized it was kind of a crappy MS Paint meme. But if you imagine the chart of how valuable and big something is versus how hard to make that thing is, it was previously quite. It kind of didn't really ramp up, and then it just went bang straight to the moon. But even then, it didn't actually go that far because it just ended up being more of the same, more of the same, more of the same. Like if you want to make a capital, it's still the same minerals, the same blueprints, put them in the same box, push the same button, get the same thing.
The only difference is with capitals is that it's a two-step process, right? You put minerals to build the thing to build the capital, whereas everything else is just you have the minerals, you build the thing. There's a few other two steps, right. Like for instance, mobile tractor unit. You build the tractor unit, and then you build the mobile tractor unit, but with other things with the tractor unit. But in general, all T1 is just minerals build thing, and capital was minerals build thing to build capital, and that was it.
Yeah, and extra steps. While they did add, it's complexity. It's kind of arbitrary complexity. So in my eyes, what they've done is they've actually taken that complexity and made it not arbitrary. They've made it interesting. They've made it, as we alluded to before, you have to deal with other people, and that has always been Eve's whole selling point. You deal with other people, you make friends, and whether that's Whether that's literally you have to go and make best buds with an alliance that has a bunch of low-sec refining structures so that what refining? Why is the word gone? Reacting structures, so that you can make all of the stuff you need to make your capitals as you do now, or your battleships or whatever else. Or it's you expand your alliance, you get a new subgroup within your group, and they do it. It's I think I can't remember who coined it, but I started seeing it a few days ago. The term of it's a jobs update. It's bringing new jobs to space. But there's now actual sensible room to be. Oh, I'm the reactions guy. I'm the building guy. I'm this guy. I'm that guy. Whereas before it was just, and I know this from experience because I basically ran my entire alliance's industry chain on my own. It was far too easy to do it on your own.
Right.
And while, yeah, you can still do that if you really want to scale, but it's become an order of magnitude harder. So to go back to that sort of imaginary graph I was thinking of, it's now a little more sloped. So you still have the first sort of 90% being relatively easy because battle cruisers and below, it's still just minerals thing.
Actually, I want to jump in on that because it's actually not just that, because they made it easier. Anything cruiser and below had all of its rare minerals except for isogen removed. So it's actually cheaper and easier. You can now get all of the resources to build a frigate in HiSec, when technically before this change, you couldn't. Well, you need a little bit of isogen, so you have to get a little bit creative about how you get your isogen. Maybe one trip out to LowSec or whatever, but that will build you everything cruiser and below. You don't actually start requiring anything fancy until battle cruiser, and then once you step up into battleships, that's when you start having these additional complexities. And of course, faction and pirate gear also has additional complexity. But I feel like we keep missing the fact that they actually lowered the entry difficulty for the things that people like. Think of the new bro. For those people, they actually their process actually got simplified.
Right, and that was kind of where I was going. Is they took the low end and made it a little bit more accessible, a little bit more normalized. The mid range stayed roughly where it is, and then they took the high end and actually just gave it a much harsher curve. Put that end game content a little bit further back, a little bit more complex, a little bit more interesting. And in a game this age, shifting the kind of end game things further back is always a good idea. You always need something more to push towards, and it does annoy me a little bit that you'll get people, naysayers, saying, the quadrillion billion mega alliances will just swallow this up and not notice. But it's not necessarily about them. It's not about trying to bankrupt those mega alliances or make their day really difficult. It's about just making industry interesting. I know, of course, yes, there is other thought to it, and there is economic balance within it. But to me, what it really did was this update, that is, it really helped make industry interesting.
Yeah, it's also worth noting that it really feels like CCP, like the design is about as clever as I could come up with to make it so that preventing the null blocks from just taking advantage of it, right? Because basically, the R4 moons are mostly in HiSec and wormhole space. And so the R4 materials is mostly mined in HiSec at this point, because that's where people can mine it safely. So if that's valuable, they're going to do it there. But you can't actually do the reactions in HiSec, which means either a HiSec entity needs to have some sort of low-sec holding to just kind of squirrel something away in order to do a lot of reactions really quick in order to get it, because it's how valuable it is. Or they need to have some sort of wormhole holding in order to do basically the same thing. The materials are most easily exported and imported when it's at the end of the reaction cycle as the reinforced carbon fibers. So my prediction is that CCP expects, or at least what I think CCP would like to happen, is that basically people will produce this reinforced carbon fibers, and then that is what will be exported in mass to nullsec, because I don't see them like mining their own R4s when they have 64s to mine. I don't see them exporting out the silicates just to do the reactions there if they can just buy the reinforced carbon fiber. So rather than just having this be a thing that the null blocks will just take over, it's easiest for them economically to just simply buy it from the people that bother to do it. And so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, but it's important to look at how the entire design is laid out and what kind of like influences it pushes for. But I actually wanted to go back because somebody, Bunja Gas, pushed back on my earlier thing. Faction ships are more difficult, even frigates and stuff like that. They not only require like some of the new reaction stuff, but they also require new exploration materials and new gas materials. On the one surface, my gut reaction was just, hey, faction materials are more complicated. You're already probably buying your BPC off the market. Or, you know, if you have the BPC, chances are, like the expectation is you don't have everything you need to build those things, that you would buy the pieces that you need, that you don't just resource, and then you'd be able to build it. But the counter to that, especially when it comes to like things like trig ships, is that one of the original cool things about trig ships was that like somebody in a wormhole could never leave that wormhole and just like get the basic ores in the area and then combine that with the special goo and blueprints that they get out of the abyss, and then poof, you can make trig ships. You can make trig ships anywhere. This makes that no longer true. I can't find a Gila somewhere and then just build it deep in nullsec where I found that Gila blueprint. I have a whole nother set of logistics. I can't figure out how to get the ore or the minerals where I found the blueprint. And so that changes the relationship of a person who's just discovered a BP, one of these blueprints that allows you to build the faction ships. Do you think that influences, or do you like how faction ships were done, or do you have your own thoughts on that?
I think they were maybe a little bit harsh on them, but I agree with the principle. Like, because as I say, it was about taking everything and looking at sort of its value in terms of how, just for simplicity, how good it is, and spreading it along a sort of difficulty to build chart, whereas it really wasn't before. Because, like you say, you could just get blueprint, make thing anywhere. It was really, really easy and ridiculous. It now kind of puts more value into them. It makes them actually worth more. Well, as we've seen, the prices have spiked to the moon at the moment, which is why I think they're a little bit overly harsh. I think they require a little bit too much, and they're a little bit too expensive. Yeah, because the faction items are often not quite as good, or not always reliably better than Tech 2. Is probably the better way to put it. Yet they cost significantly more. I still think they should be more expensive than Tech 2, yes, but not by the huge margin that's sort of appeared now.
Yeah, well, it is true that like right now we're still going through a period of adjustment. For instance, reinforced carbon fibers, that product that I was talking about, a week ago was over 100,000 a unit, which is insane. And then like 3 days ago, it was like 60,000. Then yesterday it was 30,000, and now it's like 15,000. So they are rapidly, now that people have figured out what's going on, people have gotten their reaction chains going on, moved it to market. It took a little while. Things are starting to stabilize. It is actually about time to start thinking about buying, but we'll talk more about that on the main show. So at risk of presenting you as just like, hey, elect this CCP fanboy to CSM, he doesn't think anything's a problem. No, that's what I'm saying. Like, at risk of doing that, like, let's say, like, let's turn around. Do you have any criticisms about the industry changes? What, if you're elected to the CSM, what kind of things can you give an example of the kind of things that you want to push back on? What kind of things that you want to be able to influence, and not just say to CCP, good job, keep doing it, but like, where would your voice on the CSM be used?
Well, this is where I kind of have to, and this is partially my fault, is push back on the question itself, in that this is where I would, in that case, I would actually spend probably a lot of time, assuming he gets voted in, talking to someone like Kenneth Feld, who has a bit more of a background in this, because it's still, with these industrial changes in particular, it's still too early, I think, to really make any serious judgments about what's what. And regarding my own industrial experience, yes, reasonably experienced in an industry, and it is something that I would like to concentrate on, but I would also put it in the category of things that I'm more than happy to accept that I am not the all-seeing eye on that category.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with it on probably up to building like simple caps. Beyond that, I've not spent too much time doing it. I understand the theory, but the impact of, say, introducing a new material, changing a particular material requirement for a particular blueprint, is honestly no, it's not something that I can easily look at and go, oh yeah, that's going to cause this and this and this and this.
That's right.
And now this is ruined. So I'd have to say, for the industry changes, I kind of still need to wait and see. I kind of need to talk to more people, get a better idea of what are people's pain points. For the most part, it has been most things I've heard is like it's harder, which is, to be brutally honest, it's not really a valid complaint, because that was kind of the point.
That happens a lot, I find. I frequently see player feedback, and I think to myself, you realize that all you're doing is telling the developer that like their plan worked.
You did it right.
But I'm running out of my time, so I want to make sure to drill in here. So then, why do you want to be on the CSM? Why did you decide to run this year? CSM is a lot of work. Running for the CSM is a lot of work. If you're not like seeing something that needs your voice, as it were, what makes you want to run for CSM and feel that you need to be on it above the other so many people that are running?
So here's the deep dark truth: is I fully expect not to get elected, like at all. I think my chances are probably 1 in 50, maybe around that kind of mark.
That's very pessimistic running, since we don't know how many people are running yet, and there haven't been people like 50 people in some runs. But okay, fair enough.
Maybe I'm being pessimistic, but anyway, the point is, I'm not going to wake up on the day of the results and rush to the computer and go, oh my god, have I won? Oh my god, I'm the winner. Like, no, I'm not expecting that. So the sort of the why and wherefore of me running is more, think of it almost like an awareness campaign, because of the way the election system works. Is I don't really I'm not really likely to say de-seat anybody too dramatically. So what I'm trying to do is to prove a point of, well, beyond that, my personal focus is 90% is going to be looking at things like making sure the third-party dev comes back to life. We need the ESI to come back to life. And actually trade far more than industry, to be honest. The trade interface is a bit decrepit at this point, and the contracts really need revisiting and just making more interesting and more useful. But I'll just finish my point on the sort of not getting elected side of things. Yeah. It's probably not something I should say out loud. It's more, I want, after this election is over, those who were successful, maybe I will be, maybe I won't, to look back at the numbers and see how many votes people like myself got, and see that is something that the voter base do care about. Maybe they don't care about it in such blanket numbers that they would elect somebody like me, but they do care about it enough that if you want to have a better chance of CSM 17, for example, please pay attention to this, because it feels so much that something has been neglected over and over and over, especially ever since Steve Mnuchin decided he didn't want to play the CSM game anymore.
Well, okay, so let me ask you this then, for clarity. So is this like, it's a well-known political thing that the secondary candidate, the guy who isn't even close to being elected, the Bernie Sanders effect, is that the secondary candidate really gets to set the tone of what sets the discussion of the candidacy, of the election cycle, right? So if a third party candidate or if a third candidate comes in and he's discussing, Medicare for all, well, that forces all of the main other people to also discuss that. So is this a I'm trying to influence the discussion kind of thing, or is this the other way of it looking at it is, as you mentioned, a CSM 17 run or 18 run? Is this you trying to begin the process of establishing yourself as a speaker within this area, or is this attempting to inject your topics into the conversation? Which one of those two do you feel is important, or is it both?
It's definitely a bit of both.
Okay.
When 17 comes around, we'll definitely, of course, I'm going to consider it. But for the last 3 years, I've looked at CSM and considered it every time and rejected it every time, just because it's a massive time commitment, and you do need to be knowledgeable about things, and that's why things like industry and trade are mentioned in my pitch. While I am no means an authority on things like industry, it's more that it was more to point out that I'm aware of these things, and if by some chance that I did get elected, it is something that I would at the very least attempt to represent. Because if you look at the post, for example, I make no mention of PvP. I make no mention of wormholes. I make no mention of basically gameplay styles that I know I cannot represent because I do not have the depth of knowledge there, and I'm more than happy to admit that. So yeah, ultimately it's me patting myself by saying maybe I would like to be elected one day. I don't expect this round, but if I did get elected, this is where I'd go. Over the years, I probably will have to develop my pitch and idea further, but absolutely yes, it needs to come back to the table that we need more than I love you, Kenneth Fell, but we need more than one null dude talking about industry, and we need somebody talking about third-party development, which again, actually, Kenneth Fell does a half-decent job of, especially cracking the whip on making sure they can update things like the SDE. But I know it's not one of his core principles.
There's a difference between somebody who knows to bug about a thing that's a problem and somebody who is an advocate for that thing. We need an advocate for third-party development within the CSM. Somebody who knows and understands that environment. Which I want to jump in. I'm about to give you your 10 minutes, don't worry. But I do want to reinforce, because I have been kind of hard on you for the last few questions, that really is your strength, right? Like, it isn't necessarily that you're the industrial candidate or that you're the wormhole candidate or, whatever. And oftentimes that's not even that important, because if they're not planning on updating wormholes, you can be as much of a wormhole candidate as you want, and it isn't going to do any good. Bless his heart, look at Torvald. He put all that work into faction warfare. Did he see a big update during his time? No. Might he see one next time? Yes. Why? Because it has to do with when CCP is ready to get to it. That being said, what Dr. Spod has is a lot of really detailed knowledge of how software development works and can help navigate the issue both as a customer from our, be an advocate of our side that also understands how CCP works, at least on some level, a better understanding than the average CSMer. One of the things that I constantly get told, like when I've dabbled around about running for the CSM or whatever, is that, so many people in the CSM, high hopefuls, come in and they ultimately get burned out or disillusioned because, oh, Ashtarothi, if you just could see how the sausage was made. But, software developers know how this shit works. What are you talking about? It's not going to surprise me. I know it's a mess. So, in the same way, especially in the early part of this conversation, you said some things about like the engines or like the stuff that's going on internally. that is knowledge that hopefully we'll be able to showcase more, and you can talk about during your 10 minutes if you would like to. But that knowledge, that level of intimate knowledge about how Eve works on a technical level, the amount of work that you've put in like tearing apart the game for like hobo leaks or understanding upcoming changes. You're one of the people that I've talked to about all these kinds of things, just to make sure to put that out there. So, if you want to talk about somebody who knows the game better than the people that play the game, Dr. Spodman is one of those people that would be in that category for that reason alone. Not because of an understanding of mechanics, but because of the understanding of the actual construction of the game as a piece of software, which is worth noting. That being said, before I hand it over to you, I want to ask you one more hard question. J42W points out that looking you up on the kill board finds nothing. This is what I found too. You're a mysterious. Are you the broker, Dr. Spodman? Who are you?
I do actually have a character called Broker Bob. Does that help?
No, I don't think it does. All right, so no, but do you want to address
Ben and Broker Brian? There's many of them.
One of the rules of the CSM campaign is that if you have a character that's more famous or something like that, they might switch you out. Are you bamboozling me? Like, let's just address this up front.
Yeah. So
up front.
The initial question of like, why did you get the initial first question of why did you get no results when you look at me up on Zookill? That's somewhat intentional, partially because I want to make it clear that I've done PvP, etc. I know how it works. I've run fleets. I've been an FC. I've done all that stuff. But
ganked one of our rope
it's
walls.
Not. Don't get that started. I didn't do it.
Sorry. Move on. I can vouch for his ability to do PvP. I'll just put it that way.
It wasn't. If we had time, I would go into what actually happened and why there was this great conspiracy that I ganked one of Malro's. I think it was 2 or 3 raw calls or whatever. No, it was 1.
I'm messing you.
It was Jess's raw call.
Yeah, it was our COO. Thanks. No, I'm just messing with you. I'm just kidding. Going on. Moving on.
It wasn't me. Anyway. Oh, God damn it. Anyway, so yeah, there is a backstory to the Spodman name. As in not a lore-based, as in a real backstory of why it came to be. My original character's name, if you are that curious, is Edmund Jain, spelled Jein. It's not interesting. It's a random guy that has been to Null, got dunked a lot, moved around, got dunked some more, moved to high sec, continued getting dunked. The backstory of the name is because like that Edmund Jain character, if you know who that is, I'd be very impressed, because I've consistently been out of any kind of spotlight on that character since its inception. I think the only people that know me by that name is probably my older Alliance members.
I have failed to pull it up so far. How did you spell it?
So first name is Edmund, Edmund, and the second name is Jain, spelled Jein. You won't find anything too wild. Maybe me getting dunked in some stupid ships. So the Dr. Spod character actually is younger than my use of that name. This is where it gets weirdly political. The original source of me not using my original name is when I first appeared on Talking in Stations, using a pseudonym, because I was bringing up a political issue at the time. When I say political, I mean these guys basically were massively racist.
Oh God, I remember that issue. Jesus.
Yeah, and I was basically, I'll be honest, I was fearing retribution, right? And it actually turns out rightfully so, because they made an attempt to dox me immediately afterwards. And just the name stuck. I actually was called Spodman Mining Crystal at that time, just because I looked at my cargo hold and thought, that's a funny thing. I'll call myself that. And it just slowly evolved over time. I got involved in Talking Stations a lot more. And just the name that anybody outside my alliance, and probably the most people know me by, became Dr. Spodman. And I realized at some point if I ever want to, for example, do a CSM run, I'm going to need an in-game representation. And if I call myself, I'm running for CSM as Edmund, everyone's going to be like, who the fuck is that guy? And it kind of removes any, dare I say, sort of brand recognition that I would have had. So that's why you'll find nothing about the Dr. Spod main character. It's more of it's a face for the name that came first. It's got a funny bio if you like a little bit of a joke. It's worth reading. I spent a whole 5 minutes on it.
It is worth noting. So the rules say that if you're more known as a different character, so it'll be interesting to see how they rule it, because I feel like Dr. Spod is the name that you're known by at this point. So hopefully that is the one that it sticks with. But I am slowly scrolling over your kill board at the moment, noticing that you do have a gold pod, which a person that didn't start in earnest until 2013 having a gold pod is interesting on its own right. But unfortunately, I have to give you your 10 minutes at this point if I'm going to let you go in time to get to your other show. But I will also say that if you want to know more about Dr. Spod and see more of his stuff, he is on Talking Stations, and you can talk about that all you want, plug it, and we're going to be raiding over to the Euro show as soon as this is done, where you'll be able to see Dr. Spod speak even more. So all that being said, it is now your 10 minutes.
Yeah, on that golden pod, that brown box there that's just out of frame is a sealed collector's edition. I have several of them. It's one of those things where it turned out, as a trade nerd needing a bit of cash injection, it actually turned out to be the most effective dollar to ISK ratio you could do that was legal. So I bought a bunch.
The stuff in that box is worth a lot of ISK at this point. That's true.
I think that box is about 20 bill at this point, something around that.
I know that Ash has a sleeve that like isn't even visible, but is worth like 6 billion or something like that. Sorry, proceed.
No, it's all good. So where was I going with this? I don't know whether to touch on like some of my core. Actually, I'll touch on the things that weren't necessarily brought up in the forum thread, which is my personal background beyond how many times I got shot at in space, which is I am a software developer. I have been, depending on how you measure it, for anywhere between 10 and 15 years. I have a background in, I used to do a bit of indie game dev. I have actually tinkered with MMOs as well. Not in a armchair developer, I know the best mechanic for the game, I'm very smart way, but more in a, this is how this technically works. You know, these days I work for a software consultancy, working with all kinds of weird projects and having to wire all kinds of wacky stuff together with APIs out the wazoo. So something like ESI is very familiar to me and very like normal. It's something that I do deal with on a daily basis. So that's where my sort of understanding and knowledge of a lot of that comes from. Yeah, I like space.
All right. Well, in that
I
case,
thought I had
mean,
more there, but it's not that interesting.
Well, I think that at that point it is very important to note that, as I mentioned, there's a lot more. If you have expounded on your philosophies and you communicate a lot on Talking in Stations, and if you were to be elected
not
on
always
CSM,
the best effect.
But
a little amusing anecdote is the we had the recent the fight, the M2 fight, when everyone went absolutely bananas complaining about the scary population cap and how it was fixed, and CCP eats babies because they ruined the fight on purpose. You know, I think I was one of the first people to truly call that as that's a load of bollocks. There isn't a population cap. That's not what happened, and that was not necessarily due to any sort of magical code insight. Although I did later look at some code and make an incorrect assumption that made myself look like a tit on stream. That was more just, this is sort of a humble brag, I suppose, but this is the whole point, right? Was looking at the nature of that message and where it occurred, what it said, and why it occurred, and just those three things were let me immediately just look at the original screenshot that came out and go, that's not a population cap, or at least it is, but it's not how it eventually came out to be. Yes, it's a population cap, but it didn't work how people thought it worked, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, and I will again jump in on that and say that I cannot count the number of times that you and I, like I have a bunch of people that I talk with in the background, and like Uriel's really cool because he'll be able to bring me like a model he's extracted out of the Hobo leaks or whatever. But you and I, our conversations is more like, this is what we're seeing. What could this mean? Like it's ours is far more theoretical, and it's honestly I think that some of our whatever best predictions or understandings of the situation has come from us talking. Usually you'll see a point that I don't see, or I'll see a point that you don't see, and it'll help us come to an understanding of what exactly are we seeing. Like this change, I see this change on Hobo leaks. Why would this be happening? Like what could this entail? And usually, you're one of the people that I really like to chew it over with in order to suss out what a file change or a string change or whatever could potentially mean in the wider context of things. So at the very least, check out Dr. Spod on Talking in Stations, including the show that we're about to go if you're watching it live. Once again, if you want to plug your stuff there before we leave, we can do that too.
Yeah, so just after this show, I'm going to hop off to the Talking Stations Euro show, which is actually not a pure classic Eve show in the like this is the latest war news or this is the new update. It's more looking at the game industry news as a wider subject and looking at how it meshes with Eve, how it relates to Eve, which usually involves a topic getting brought up and then me shutting down the wistful dreams by saying, no, that's not possible. That's not possible. That's not possible.
A good example.
Can't do that.
A good example of this was that when the browser, the play in the browser window came out, and I started riffing on what potential that would be. Dr. Spod was the guy that was like, actually, it's way simpler than you think. It's just this, and I'm like, oh, okay, never mind. Thanks for reining me back down.
Actually.
It's great because I have to do
guy.
that. I have to do that so often, and have it happen to me makes me feel pretty good. No, it's good to have you around because otherwise, all we have is us raving lunatics.
I'm one of you. We all sit there and stare at Hobo leaks for hours and hours and hours until it burns into our brains and we come up with wild conspiracy theories. I've had a fair share of my own.
Speaking of
made
conspiracy
no
theories,
sense eventually.
Marcus wants to know: did you predict that it was EOM all along?
I didn't follow the story far enough to make that assumption initially, but somebody raised that with me about a week and a half ago. Not well. How long ago was it? After the second attack, I think someone pointed out that it's probably that. And yeah, I looked at the EOM stuff, and to be honest, to me, I used to be very heavily into the lore stuff. Used to be is the sad part. Is these days I don't follow it too much. So to me, it was like, oh, that's the event thing. Cool. Is this related? I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. It's not something that I divine the tea leaves on too much. I spend most of my time looking at what's this mysterious new sound file? Why is this? What's this new model? And that's me alluding to the great mystery, because every time I ask any CCPer about it, they go completely deathly silent. What's with the secret in-game Triglavian remix of the Wrecking Machine track? What's that for? Where's it going? Where'd it come from? Cotton Eye Joe.
Do you have that file?
I don't have it to hand, but I got a SoundCloud link for you if you want.
Yeah, go ahead and send it to me, and then I'll play it to finish us out. But okay, I do have one more question. Valamir wants me to ask for you to prove your PhD, or is this a Dr. Pepper kind of situation? Where's your degree in Spodomane from?
So that actually goes back to the character name. If you look at it closely and do a little bit of Googling, you'll realize that Dr. Spod is his backstory is he invented a cure for excessive pilot aggression after using too many boosters, which involved infusing kunzite into your cerebellum, which, if you then Google what that means, kunzite is a real-world analog of spodumene, and cerebellum is brain. So it's basically just a gigantic Dr. Spod brain meme.
My favorite part of this interview now is the fact that you went from I'm not really into the lore to that explanation in like 0 to 60. It was great. All right. Well, I'm going to let you go so that way you can get started and I'll wrap things up. I assume Caleb is also needing to bounce so that way you can get live, so that way I can raid over. But it has been...
Yep. Final plug. Literally pick a major Discord for Eve. I'm probably on there. I'm always replying to people. There's a couple that I frequent directly if you want to talk to me that way, but my DMs are open if you want to ask me something, you want to talk about technical stuff, if you want to speculate on the weirdest stuff you just found on Hobo Leaks, I'm more than happy to talk to you. Emails work too, but most of the time I end up reading those through the API, ironically.
So that's a good point. Before you go, like, if you see something on Hobo Leaks and you're like, oh my God, before you go run to Reddit, because there's so many people, like, if you don't know what you're looking for or you don't know what you're looking at, it's very easy to come to ridiculous conclusions. So, it's important to run it by Dr. Spod or myself or one of these other people that spend some time reading the tea leaves, understanding what to say, because so many times people are like, oh, look at this thing. And it's like, oh, no, that's been that way for like months. What are you talking about? So, yeah, reach out. All right. Thank you so much, man. Good luck with your campaign. And,
it's a good time.
See where it goes.
See you around. The lore backstory is just a modified version